If you ever wondered why Black Africa is the way it is today, if you ever wondered why Black people are still oppressed everywhere in the world, if you ever wondered why Africa still contains the poorest people in the world, this video is for you. I'm going to show you in this video series how Africa became the world's poorest continent, even though Africa contains and has the huge amount of resources it has, and why after centuries since the end of slavery, Africans are still being oppressed. Now, I want to start this video by telling you about Europe before 1422. By 1422, when the first Europeans came to West Africa, now when I say the first Europeans, I mean the Portuguese. Yes, not the English, not Danish, not the Spanish, the Portuguese. So the Portuguese came to the west coast of Africa in 1422. That first entry to the coast of Africa, they took 12 slaves. But let me dial back. Let's go back to what it was like in Europe before 1422. Now, ever heard of the 100 Years' War? This is the war that was fought between 1337 to 1453 between England and France. So the French and the English were fighting wars between themselves. The English conquered France, took some part of France, and then after a couple of years, the French, with the help of Joan of Arc, conquered part of those territories and got their territories back. So there was war between France and England. So you can imagine, for 100 years in Europe, there was severe oppression, there was war, people were being killed, there was also famine, there was also disease as well. There were witch hunts. Joan of Arc, for example, was killed by the British after they caught her in France and they burned her on the stakes as a witch. So Europe was not a pleasant place to be in 1422. The 100 Years' War ended in 1453. So, but before then, because Europe was so difficult to live in, because they were so impoverished, because there was so much disease and turmoil, some Europeans chose to leave, just like every human being has left, his place of origin for hundreds of years. So Europeans looked outside of their realm and said, look, it's so horrible here in Europe. There's so much war, so much famine, there's so much disease, there's so much wickedness. Let us go and explore the world. Let us go and look for riches, treasures elsewhere. Let us go to discover Africa. Let's go and discover new places. Of course, they never discovered Africa. Africa was there before they went there anyway. But my point is that Europe was so impoverished, things were so bad that Europeans had to sail from Europe looking for treasure, looking for gold, looking for business. So now this sets the stage for the first European landing on the coasts of West Africa. So this was the first entry into West Africa. This was the first time that they could find slaves. And slavery was a business. It wasn't about racism. Okay, people often say, oh, maybe the white people felt that Africans were below them or beneath them and they went and took them away. No, slavery was a business. So I'm gonna try to explain to you guys how the business of slavery helped to lift Europe from their poverty during the 15th century. Welcome back. So back to the topic on slavery. So again, just to be clear, slavery was a business. It was not about racism. When Europeans left Europe and sailed on their ships to Africa, they were looking for business. They came to Africa, they found that there were men that they could kidnap and use as a means of production. Now, let me make it clear again. As horrible as it sounds, slavery was a business. Now, imagine if you had the choice of purchasing a cow, for example, or a donkey to till your land. And you had the choice of purchasing a human being who can speak, talk, who can learn how to use farm implements, who can pick and pluck cotton, who can pluck grapes. What would you choose? You would choose a man. So let's stop the sentiments right now. The Europeans, because of the difficulties they faced in the 15th century in Europe, because of the wars between England, France, Italy, because of the Inquisitions, because of the famine, because of the disease, the epidemics they had in Europe, they were looking for business. So when they got to West Africa, they discovered that they could pay African middlemen to capture human beings. Okay, so now, if you look at the African map, most of the areas where there was slavery was on the coast. So you look at from the coast of West Africa, from Guinea down to Angola, okay? Most of the coastal areas were developed by the Europeans. They built ports, they were able to land their ships because this was the only way they could extract labor from Africa. And that labor was the slaves. Okay, when the Europeans were leaving, their kings sponsored these expeditions. Okay, so it wasn't like one person just showed up and wanted to buy slaves. In some cases, businessmen will go to the king and say, look, King Leopold of Belgium, I want to go to Africa to do some business and I want to bring you back slaves. I want to bring you back gold and diamond. I want to bring you back all kinds of goodies. And the king will say, yes, I will pay you £100,000 to sponsor your ship. Or the king will build them a ship and give them the ship to go. So the kings and the queens of Europe sponsored some of those ships. When they went to Africa, they met on the coasts African tribesmen, African middlemen who were gullible, who were stupid. Okay, now let's dial back. You may ask, why did the African middlemen sell their brothers and sisters to slavery? Okay, so while Europe was in turmoil, while Europe was fighting wars between English and the French, Africans were also in their own stage of development. They also had their own problems. They were fighting their own wars. They had kingdoms, like in Oyo Empire of Nigeria. It was a huge kingdom. Okay, in Sokoto there was the Sokoto Caliphate. It was a huge caliphate. So there were different kingdoms. Benin Kingdom in present-day Nigeria, and like I said, the Oyo Empire in present-day Western Nigeria. So Africans had their own kingdoms, they had their own kings, they had their own rivalries, they were fighting wars. And so suddenly there appears a white man on the coast. And this white man says, well, I'm looking around, I want to see what you guys have to offer. I have some trinkets, I have some kettles, I have some mirrors that you guys can take. And then the African locals will say, oh, well, that mirror looks nice, it looks interesting, I can see my reflection in the mirror. Or the trinket looks nice, oh, it's fancy, or whatever, okay? And then slowly the Europeans used guile, deceit. They deceived the Africans by telling them that we want to bring your brothers over to Europe to help us develop our countries. We want to help enlighten them, okay? So what happened then, when these Europeans came, the Africans realized that they could actually give some of their unwanted people to these slavers, okay? So there were wars. People who were captured from war were then given away as slaves. Obviously, the kings of African nations were paid for those slaves. So kings of Dahomey, for example, made money from the slave trade. The Oyo Empire made money from slavery as well. And it was so bad that when the British outlawed slavery in 1807, some of the African kings were against the ban on slavery because it became a huge business for them. They made money from selling slaves. Okay? So after a while, Up to 10 million slaves were taken from West Africa between 1445 to 1807 when the British outlawed slavery. Okay, and among that 10 million, this is actually an underestimate. Okay, so people said it could be from 10 million to 100 million slaves were taken. But we also think that about 2 million people died on the way in those voyages. Almost an estimate of about 100,000 people were taken from Africa every year in those centuries. Now imagine the impact of 400 years of removal of African able-bodied men and women. Mind you, this is business. So if you are crippled from war, they won't take you. If you are blinded by war, they won't take you. If you had a disease in Africa, they won't take you. They took people who were healthy, who were muscular, who were tall, because this was business. Just like if you were going to look at your cattle, you want to buy cattle, you look at their muzzles, look at their teeth, make sure that they are healthy. So this was how it was. They took the best of Africans, and after the kings of Africa couldn't find any slaves from their capture victims, they began to fight more wars because there was now an incentive. People like the kings of Ghana, who used to previously deal in gold, began to deal in slaves because slaves were making more profit for them than gold. The kings of Ghana felt that it was a waste of time to send laborers to go and dig for gold to sell to the white man when they could just sell human beings and make double the profit. So in that way, the Europeans encouraged wars in Africa, encouraged strife. So they left Europe where there was strife, famine and war, came to Africa and fomented war just to be able to extract slaves. Now, in the next video, I will talk a bit more about the impact of slavery on the economies of African countries. See you in the next video. Stay tuned.